This is incredible. Hello, everyone. This is Matt Robeson. I'm here with Katie Harbath. And to all of our subscribers on both of our Substacks, to all of the subscribers tuning in through Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, I think I'm forgetting a platform, LinkedIn, I have to apologize. This is the most meta thing that's ever happened to me in the history of my podcast, which goes back almost 6 years, my history in radio, or this live stream, which is I'm doing a show about the intersection of politics and technology and the dangers posed by AI and technology and what it means that it's infiltrating all of our brains and all of our politics. And in the midst of that, I have been subjected to some kind of technological gremlin that failed to have the live stream launch. I'm pretty sure I pressed the button, folks. I'm not sure if somewhere the technological demons or ChatGPT or MattGPT or some other force of artificial nature has intervened to get in the way of what was promising to be a rip-roaring start and a brilliant setup, I might say, to the conversation I'm having with Katie here, one of the stone-cold experts on planet Earth about the intersection of technology and politics. But we are midstream in the middle of this fascinating conversation, and we're going to continue right along with it. So people are going to have to lose the context of everything that I set up for the first 3 minutes of this, in which I laid out, look, technology and AI particularly is embedded now in every link in the chain that goes from political campaigns into our government. I've been a part of every link of that chain as a campaign manager and as a political staffer, as a congressional staffer, and as a voter. And I can tell you that things are very different now, and AI is making an impact. But the question is, how big an impact? How real is it? How scary is it? And that's what Katie was just starting to describe. And now I've caught us up. Yes, Jim Williams. Yes, gremlins. See, I thought that all of the brilliant comments that were getting splashed up on the screen were live reactions to all the incredible stuff we were saying. It was just people chatting and waiting for me, waiting for Godot and for Katie. Katie, welcome back. Here we go. This was like, we're in the middle of
We're
it. I was
doing it
learning a
live.
lot.
You know the Bill O'Reilly skit where that skit, like it was live, when he was just like, "We're doing it live." That's what we're doing, Matt. We're
doing it live.
We're doing it live.
This is a really. But by the way, we're meeting for the first time here. I've been reading you for a while here. This isn't exactly a professional meet cute. This is the weirdest professional meeting I've had with someone ever. All right, here's what people missed. I laid out this idea that this might be the first AI election ever, because of the influence that it's starting to have in every link of that chain. You were saying that in the course of working on your Substack, Anchor Change, which is excellent, and your forthcoming book, Disrupting Politics, a front row seat at the collision of technology and democracy, you were saying, here's the thing. We are right on the edge. We are on the cliff's edge, but we're not quite there yet. All of the promise of a major sea change, but we're just still in very early days. And I was reading that back to you and you were riffing. So let's pick it up. Where did you want to go with that?
I wanted to go with that around, we were talking about deepfakes, right? And I've got a phrase, panic responsibly, around all of this that I created in 2023, because it was like AI people were either doomers or they were like all in on AI. And the truth of the matter is that there's gonna be things we need to be concerned about, and there's great promise around it. But also, I think one of the things I found the most in my research is that we have to be separating out what AI might be able to do in the future versus what it can do today. And I think that right now, understandably, people have a lot of fear of the unknown about what might happen with AI. And I think that is one thing that we are seeing campaigns grappling with, because they want to use the new tools. They're mainly using them for productivity, for research, for all of that kind of stuff. But they also have to thread the needle between, as you were saying, these other parts of the stack of the campaign. AI is a campaign issue. AI in government services, AI in jobs, AI in the economy. It is going to be hitting every single aspect. And so the campaigns have to grapple with that, but so do the tech companies and so do the government. And so it is a real kaleidoscope of different things when it comes to AI that we're going to see a little bit in the midterms, but it's going to be 2028, which is going to happen as soon as the midterms are over, that we're going to start seeing some presidential campaigns really pushing the envelope of using this technology.
All right, so let's talk about where the impact is being felt. And I had laid out at the beginning these 4 links in the chain, from our political campaign activity all the way through to the way we take in information as voters and make our decisions, to the kinds of influence that tech companies have over our elections, to the decisions that are being made inside government right now. Let's start with the campaign piece. I don't want to get down in the weeds or too much inside baseball. There's a small sliver of people who really care about the mechanics of campaigns. But I want to highlight something fascinating that you did. It's on your Substack. It's worth a read. It's really interesting. You did, as far as I know, the first of its kind survey of people inside campaigns on how they're actually using AI. What stood out to you? What did you learn in the course of doing that?
So I do have to give props to the AAPC, the Association of American Political Consultants. They also did a survey as well that sort of inspired the one that I did then with newsletter writers Eric Wilson, Amanda Elliott, and Kyle Tharp, because they were talking to consultants about how they're using AI. And I wanted to go a level deeper of how campaigns were using it. So we put out this survey. We had 68 people take it, and it was pretty equal DNR, Republican and Democrat, that took this. And like you said, 87% of them say they're using AI on a daily basis. What's interesting, though, too, is that most of them don't have a policy for their campaigns about how they should be using AI. And there's the tricky part of, do they disclose it or not? Because most voters, I also did a survey of voters, and we might get to this, so I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself. But most voters want that disclosure, but they also trust things less if they see that it's using AI. And so the campaigns are like, we want to use the tools, but our voters, is this, to me, is this going to be like negative campaigning where voters say they hate it, but it's still effective, so campaigns do it? I think that's going to be the same thing with AI, because I don't think every use of AI is bad. Frankly, I think most of them are just fine. But we're in this, like you said, we're on this cusp where everyone's trying to figure out where these guardrails are.
What I'm trying to figure out, is this bad or not? And I'm not sure. You could make an argument that it is, that it's distortionary, that people trust the information that they're getting from their candidates, who are, after all, asking us for a job with immense power behind it. On the other hand, look, you read the article that I wrote on my Substack
Yep.
a month or so back, in which I said, Substack's got a problem. They don't require AI labeling. I think it's going to completely hollow out the platform over time. I personally use AI in very limited context. I used it to help me generate the thumbnail image that you may be looking at if you're watching this on YouTube right now. It has an AI rendering of you and your face, which I gave it from a photo of you. I told it what words to use. The images are all AI. Why? Because I am a shitty graphic designer. I have absolutely no visual sense whatsoever. And any of my art teachers could confirm that. So there's nothing about that's scary. If campaigns are using it like, yeah, we need a new logo. I used to hire my male consultant, not gender, the person who put together our political mail. I would say, could you design the logo for us? Now AI can do it in about 10 seconds, and it's pretty good. So is that the kind of function, or are campaigns using AI in ways that affect the thoughts that are going into their brains and the words that are coming out of their lips?
So I think there's a couple of things here. One, I am all in on transparency, and more transparency breeding more trust. I also, on my Substack, I have an entire disclosure and ethics page that I try to update every quarter that goes very detailed in how I use AI. Even in my book, I have a section in the back of my book about how I used AI. I wrote the first draft myself, but AI, there were ways it helped, ways it didn't. But I have found, for me and my audience, it has built up more trust versus reduced more trust. So I think here in the beginning, people do need to be more transparent, because if you tell them like, oh yeah, I'm fine with the logo, but I may not be as fine with you making a deep fake of your opponent saying something that they didn't actually say. And that nuance matters to a lot of people. That's why it's so hard to answer the question, is it bad or not? Because you need to be like, give me more details. What are you using it for? What does that look like? And the challenge there is that whether it's the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, or at the state level, we don't have these guardrails yet. We didn't even create these guardrails back in 2004 when blogging first came on board, and internet and social media, because it's all moving so fast for people to try to figure out like where people are going to be okay with it. And so I think we will see different campaigns taking different tactics to try to figure out and thread this needle of using the technology and letting voters know how they're using the technology.
For my part, and we can move on to the next link in the chain in just a moment. I think often of James Carville did a training for us campaign managers over at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee years ago when I was a Hill staffer. And he said, look, most people think campaigns are like you sit around, drink coffee, and talk strategy. You've got one, this is how he put it. You got one
Yes.
thumb in your mouth, the other thumb up your ass. You switch them every half hour. You think you've accomplished something. And it's true. That is the impression. The reality is campaigns are a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of spreadsheets. A successful campaign is basically won on a spreadsheet through strategic decisions that you make there, but then through a lot of legwork. You're picking up the phone, you're calling donors, you're sending volunteers door to door. You're making a lot of decisions and you're undertaking a lot of actions that can be automated, that AI can help you do better. And I felt like my calling card was I was awesome at budget management as a campaign manager. But look, if Claude can set you up with an awesome budget spreadsheet and tell you exactly how to do it, if you're like a 22-year-old campaign manager and match me on that, shoot, I guess that hurts my job prospects. But do you as a voter care? No, not really. As I think where people start to get a queasy feeling is in the next link of the chain, how voters are taking in information.
Yep.
And that's where your separate survey work has revealed some disturbing numbers about the information we're getting through an AI intermediary. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I did a separate survey in conjunction with the Rainey Center, which is a think tank here. And it was about 1,000 plus voters that we looked at. Now, only 9% of voters say they use AI to get political information. However, I think that's a misleading number because I think a lot of people don't realize that when they Google something, they are
Yes.
getting an AI generated answer. And so, first of all, we have this mismatch between people thinking, am I using AI or not? Because it's getting incorporated into their daily routines in a way that they don't even realize at the moment. Then the scary part, though, was that the two main ways voters are using AI is to summarize the news and fact check when it comes to political info. You then marry that with what another organization, Forum AI, which is some of my former Meta colleagues have created, is looking at how they're looking at the bias of answers in these models. They're looking at there's this thing where now models won't just go off of what they're trained off of. They'll go out to the web and try to pull news articles. Because many news organizations understandably are blocking these models from getting access to their content, they're just pulling what they can get off the internet. It's LinkedIn, it's Reddit, some of it's foreign, some of it's Chinese foreign media. So that's a problem, as well as like where there's a real gap right now of what the available information is on the internet, or there's some sort of factual mistake, which with elections, you don't want somebody asking where to vote and getting information from the 2024 election, because that will have changed to 2026. So there's a lot of different aspects here of where, and I know we're going to get to the tech company part, but how these companies need to be thinking about it, but also how do you create media literacy with voters about this whole new way now? We just got them used to everything that happened after 2016. Now, how do we start to continue to educate them about how AI information is different than how you used to get information?
Since you invoked 2016, I want to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, because you've been on the front lines of this. And I gather from reading you that you learned some difficult and maybe painful lessons from that
Yes.
experience. You were at Facebook. You were one of the people in charge of trying to deal with all of the morass that became the problems in the 2016 elections. So you were there during, shall we say, rough times at the intersection of
Yes.
tech and politics. And back then, the tech we were worried about was algorithmic, not AI. But the output of concern was the same. We were worried about reality distortion, misinformation, and the overarching concern about people's voting decisions getting skewed or broken. So, did you have a lesson learned out of that experience that you wish people would apply to AI today?
Yes, there's many and a couple. And I go through a lot of this in the book too. I think there's a couple things. One is in 2016, we were not being imaginative enough about where the new threats were coming from. we were playing, there's always this thing of fighting the last war, right?
Yeah.
And we were not thinking about we were thinking about cybersecurity in the traditional cybersecurity sense, or we were thinking about propaganda or foreign propaganda in that way, in the traditional sense. We were not thinking about how that mirrored or melded into people creating fake profiles, pretending to be American, how that built into the algorithm. Remember, the first story out of 2016 was not Russia, it was Macedonian teens creating
Yes.
content to make money. So let's now port that to today, 10 years later. Now it's going to be Macedonian teens pretending to be influencers using AI to create that content. And now they might be monetizing off of these platforms, off of Instagram, off of TikTok, whatever it might be. And so are we paying attention to how these new vectors are going to be playing out? And my biggest fear is we're not looking underneath these new rocks of what might happen. Same thing of what we were talking about in terms of how these AI models provide the summaries. This is a really ripe area right now for actors who want to influence the information space to just flood the zone. Fled the zone while everyone's trying to figure out what this should look like. And we need to be aware of that. And it was something we were not thinking about back in 2016 that I really wish we were spending more time talking about today.
I'm going to break the fourth wall for a second here. I totally did not plan this, but you've inspired me. I have been accused at times of using a fake background, that these books are not real. I am indeed in my office. These are real books. I've read most of them. My wife's read the other set of them. And I'm turning over my shoulder. I'm breaking a rule of podcasting to highlight a book that I'm going to pull off my bookshelf. This is Will He Go by Amherst College professor Lawrence Douglas from 2020, in which he did essentially a solo tabletop exercise where he imagined what would happen if Donald Trump tried to claim vote rigging or otherwise undertook some form of skullduggery to mess with the 2020 election. And the point is, I think we've seen the value of these kinds of tabletop planning exercises in trying to inject that element of imagination or to make up for the failure of imagination you were just talking about. And by the way, I know that I'm a Democrat. I think Democrats are particularly sensitive to Meta, Facebook, Zuckerberg. These are all trigger words for us. We carry a lot of PTSD. It resonates for me when you talk about fallible, highly intelligent human beings like you trying to figure this out in real time and us having the benefit of 2020 hindsight now. So my point being that there's a lot of value in these kinds of exercises to try to make up for failures of information. And when you're talking about AI and the ways it can be used now and the lessons you wish could be applied from 10 years ago to now, have you done any exercises like this to try to be more creative about, if I were trying to monetize or mess with the 2026 or 2028 elections, what would I do? How would I leverage AI to do it? What sneaky new innovations have we not thought of yet? Have you done that exercise? And if so, do you have any worries about publicizing your results because you might give people bad ideas?
That was always one of the challenges when we were at the company too, was how much could you talk about this, because you didn't want to give people ideas or tell them how to get close to the line without going over the line. That was a real philosophical challenge. I call these impossible trade-offs. You'll notice I have a couple of catchphrases for these different things, but it was one of the hardest things for me when I would work with outside groups. I was like, okay, here are the two really hard things I'm weighing, and I have to pick one. Which one do you want me to pick? They're like, oh, no, that's too politically sensitive, or I'm going to get in trouble. I'm like, you're telling me you don't trust my decision on it, but you won't tell me what you would do. What do you want me to, I was always, what do you want me to do in this? To answer your question though, every election cycle since, like, even before 2020, we were doing them after 2016 for the 2018 elections, and not just in the US, but globally around all this. And one of the reasons we created the election war room, and most companies have created these since then, is the biggest challenge is you can come up with every scenario in your head. It's not how it's exactly going to play out. So the part of the war room is actually having the operation set up of what are the steps we're going to take? Who needs to be in the room? Who needs to know? Who's on call? What teams do you need to have to think through? And then we would run some of those scenario exercises to play them out, but it never actually happened in the way that we thought that it might. And one of our biggest challenges was actually getting senior leadership sometimes to work on these for them to think through, because they had to make the final call.
Or an
around what.
Anthropic and OpenAI doing this kind of thing right now? Do you know, or
To
do
my
you
knowledge, yes.
believe?
Yeah.
Mm,
I think like all of the companies continue to do this, particularly around foreign interference and different things, those types of topics and everything. And in fact, I am also, because one of the challenges was, and another lesson learned from the 2016 time period and after, has always been, how do we bring civil society and think tanks into this conversation? How do we bring outside experts in? And how do we make sure we're doing a feedback loop to them about
mm,
how we're trying to work on it internally? Now, one of the challenges and one for people inside the tech companies is you get them in a room and it's like that Spider-Man meme where everyone's pointing fingers at one another, and it can be really hard to have that conversation. And since Trump came back into office, a lot of these groups have, they don't have as much funding, and they're very nervous about getting attacked. So one of the things I am trying to do is try to put together forums for people to at least learn what others are thinking about, do some of these scenario exercises. I'm also in a Substack here probably next week. I've got 15 new vectors laid out, everything from influencers, AI, et cetera, that I want to be keep thinking through and make people aware of, that we need to be thinking through about how this might manifest, not just for the midterms, because midterms are usually not
right.
as fraught as a presidential. But I am very worried about if the Senate or the House comes down to one race, and that race is in a recount or an audit. The biggest challenge of the time period that scares me the most is from election day to a vote being certified. And our
Why?
election officials, because election officials do wonderful jobs, but it's very intricate. And every state, if not every county, has different rules for when they can open up ballots. We saw this in California. California took forever to count their ballots. It gave people a lot of time to be like, oh, is this fraudulent? Why is the count changing? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's that fog of war time period where people who want to influence what people think have that opportunity to do, because we don't have the answer yet of what is going to happen. And so I think we need more educating for people about how these election processes happen post-election. We learned this from January 6th, because most people were like, I thought I learned the winner on election night and that was it. I didn't know things got certified on January 6th. Forgive me, I might be going a little bit too much
No, no,
stale,
no.
but like,
You're going down such a fascinating road, and you know what? This is an aspect I had not thought about, and it's really, I'm so glad you're bringing it up, because we do tend to think in terms of pre-election day mechanics, and some of the stuff that Lawrence, he was on my show way back when talking about the book. Some of the stuff that Lawrence was laying out actually was neither far-fetched and kind of came to pass. What if someone messed with Detroit Edison through a cyber hack, and therefore the key county, which is predominantly Black in Detroit, lost power on election day? And since Black voters disproportionately tend to go to the polls rather than vote by mail, at least they did at the time, that would have a disproportionate impact on Democratic votes in the swing state of Michigan. That could tilt the election. That's the kind of thing we
mhm.
tend to think about. What you're laying out is really fascinating and absolutely true. I first experienced this in the 2000 election. I was in grad school. I was at the Kennedy School of Government. It was Orwellian. We have this central hall, essentially, and they set up TVs all around it. They were like visa screens from Orwell, and there was a constant news feed with the count, the recount, the legal action. And one of the things we learned in the 2000 election was that there was as much work that went into shaping perceptions of what was going on, what was fair, what was legal, what had happened heretofore. There was as much work that went into that as went into the work of shaping the actual voting before the election.
Yep.
And we saw it again in 2020 and 2024, where there is this post-election phase where you fight the fight for perceptions. And
Yep.
I see exactly what you're saying, that there is a unique vulnerability there to deepfakes, misinformation, engineered reality that could fundamentally change perceptions and therefore change the outcomes of elections.
And even things can be true, because this is the challenge with how decentralized our election system is, that I'm from Wisconsin. Somebody from Wisconsin could be looking at what's happening in California or another state and be like, wait, I don't understand. Why is that state different than my state? I don't understand why that's happening. Does that mean that there's something weird going on? Because, like, most people are not into the weeds like you and I are into how much all of this stuff works. And so there's also just an education piece around, and also that can we all, this is if I could wave my magic wand, but can we all calm down a little bit and let election officials do their job and audit it and help to understand like how these processes work without, but we are going to be fighting the perception war, and people need to, this is the thing I keep hammering into people's heads is, yes, let's worry about before the election, but don't forget about post-election and how important that can be.
That's a brilliant point. It connects to this comment from Cynthia Rice, which I do. This came up before the gremlins struck. I had reminded everyone in the chat family out there to keep the questions and comments coming at us while we have a stone cold expert here to avail ourselves. And Cynthia here, just for people who will be listening to this later on audio, is asking, why does Facebook do nothing about fake AI deep fakes? I see big creators using rage bait fakes just to get likes and comments. They're pushing outright lies. I do see on Facebook, look, I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, and I don't spend a ton of time on Facebook Reels. But from what I've seen, there seems to be some AI labeling going on there. But what's your take on Cynthia's question?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is because before I forget, I want to talk about labeling because I think labeling is important. But one thing to remember, and we saw this post 2016 because everyone was like, just label fake news. I don't understand what the problem is. Just label it if it's fake. First of all, most content is not either completely true or completely false. There's usually a little bit of a mix of both. The other thing we found was that, and a lot of researchers have done research on this, by telling somebody something is fake, it actually made them believe it more, made them dig in their heels even
Wait, say
more.
that again. Wait, what?
I know. Giving people a label saying this is false, oftentimes, if it challenged their preconception, oftentimes made them dig their heels in more, saying, no, this is real, than being like, oh, maybe I should think about this differently. And so there's a lot of nuance and research going into how do you best help take people on that journey around giving them more context or information. The other challenge with labels is people start to just ignore them. They just, if they see them all the time, they just don't even really pay attention to them. They don't necessarily know what it means, et cetera. Now, that's one component of it. The other component that Facebook and many of these other companies, particularly since Trump won in 2024 and took office in 2025, is really pulling back on content moderation, pulling back on trust and safety work because of these First Amendment questions, because of these investigations by Republicans and Jim Jordan in the House, et cetera, really pushing this concept of censorship. Now, we can get into the details of only the government can censor people. These companies are private companies. They can do what they want with their news feeds. But that's a big challenge too, is it's never cut and dry. And what's satire, what's not. This is what I would spend hours in rooms debating about how do you draw lines for these things. And there's some stuff that's super clear that you're like, no, we're not going to allow, or we are going to allow. It's that messy middle that I do this with college kids where I'll make them be content moderators. And it's these tricky edge cases. And you'll have a completely split room on what you should do about it.
The New York Times podcast, The Daily, actually did that exercise a couple of years ago where they went through with the content moderators at Facebook and they're like, ban, allow, label. And it was like, this isn't as easy as I thought it would be. I just want to note a deep irony going on here that pertains to the AI part of this, which is right now I can see, although the numbers get very skewed in the interface we're working through the live stream, I can see that we're not getting as many viewers as is typical on YouTube. We're getting a ton on Twitter. And Twitter is the home of probably the most notorious AI out there right now. Please, Elon, don't shut us down. Watch. This is where the gremlins came from. Elon is coming for me and hopefully not for you. So there's something very odd about this. And it presents extra challenges when you have to think about, do I trust the Google AI a little bit more? Like each platform, certainly I do more than the Twitter, which I refuse to call X AI. It's a fascinating question and it tees up. I do want to get to other links in the chain that I set up, but there's a global question that it tees up for me. As you talk about all of this immense challenge that you encountered at Facebook and that are devoting all of your work to now, it really reminds me of this shocking moment when Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton left the board of Google. He's known as the father of AI for his Nobel Prize winning insights into how to create a functioning AI. And he left because he was concerned about the future dangers of artificial intelligence. And the danger that he foresaw was a fundamental inability for people to distinguish reality from unreality. That at a most basic level, AI would mess with that. It's what you alluded to me in an email to me as a kaleidoscopic minefield that I think we're beginning to have to pick our way through. Now, I know this is a very highfalutin, not particularly substantial observation, but more than the campaign mechanics, like our young campaign staffers using AI to draft their tweets, like, all right, big whoop. Our voters having to wade through some challenges of misinformation, fake information, biased information. Yes, but that's not entirely new. What about the aggregate effect? How worried are you about this overall miasma of surreality that is increasingly going to cloud our brains? And Dr. Hinton's fear that the most fundamental thing we have to do in a democracy is take in information and make decisions, and AI is going to impede our ability to do that.
So I am worried, but I always have a slice of optimism when I think about this stuff, because I'm like, otherwise I'll feel curled up in the corner and never being able to function and think. So let me talk about the worries first, and then I want to get to the optimism side. One is, we've been talking a lot about news feeds and how they're algorithmically curated, and we've been talking about that a lot. If you listen to Mark Zuckerberg on earnings calls, and I think the tech earnings calls are where everyone should be paying attention, because they tell you the roadmap they're on. And Mark Zuckerberg talks about a future where your newsfeed is no longer curated for you, meaning that you're being shown content that other people are making that you might be interested, to being created for you. And by that, AI creating content custom to you based upon your likes and interests. They don't need creators. They don't need influencers. They don't need brands. They don't need any of that. It's AI doing that for you. I worry about that putting us into even more of our own siloed worlds. And I think that's another aspect of the AI part that hasn't come to fruition yet, but I'm keeping an eye on, because it's clearly something that at least Facebook and others are starting to think about. I do think that, oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, it looked like you were going to say something.
But go on. I was about to topic shift slightly, but
Okay.
please finish.
Let me just finish and then we can totally do
that. Yeah.
So I do get worried about that. I get worried about this time period where we are still trying to figure all of this out. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And there's a big gap, not just between where Silicon Valley is and where DC is, but where normal people are. Like I was talking to my parents, my nephews who are high school. Everyone's in a little bit of a different stage of using AI and how they think about AI. And we have to remember that, because I oftentimes try to remind folks at the tech companies that we need to bring people along a lot more. But when you have this time period where people are getting educated, it's just a lot of opportunity to mess with people, and people just don't know what to believe. And then it makes people prey on that fear around all of that that's happening. Let me get to the positive, though, and I talk about this at the end of my book, is that we all still have agency. We all still have agency in terms of which sites we go on. We can remember that the algorithm in the news feed goes off of what are we spending time watching? What are we clicking? I try to do this for myself every 6 months. I do a news audit. I try to consciously pay attention. Where am I spending my time? What accounts am I following? What newsletters am I reading? Does it match if somebody asked me what my news diet was, does it match what I want, what I aspire it to be versus what it actually is? Because I think a lot of times we just go through our day and we consume stuff and we don't necessarily think through, is this where we actually want to be spending our time? We can choose which AI tools. One of the things we saw in my surveys was that with campaigns, more Democrats were using Claude, whereas more Republicans were using ChatGPT and for sure Grok and stuff like that. But it's on all of us. I don't want to put it all on all of us, but I do think we have choices that we can make in being more educated and knowing what platforms and stuff we want to use. And we are seeing this kind of a lot more people wanting events. You talk to a lot of creators and influencers who influence creators. They're talking about the next big thing is going to be in-person events. They think more and more that people are going to want to be doing analog, be doing stuff in person. And so I'm paying attention to that tension that we're going to have between this new AI technology and then also a people's desire to have human connection.
I will quickly co-sign sort of an aspirational hope that is true and that is right. I've heard a version of that among writers, and I hate the word content. It screams gray goo to me.
Yeah.
I hate the term creators because it's even oddly ickier. But as a content creator, I've heard a lot of that there will be a Moneyball move toward what is not right now an undervalued asset. I said I use AI almost exclusively for image generation, a little bit for research. I find that when I use it for research, and I've written about this, it's a very slippery slope. As soon as it diverges at all from my strict instruction to not write things for me, to not suggest language for me, I find that it messes with my brain. It actually makes my writing process harder. And I have a hope. I'm no longer seeing any advantage to having YouTube optimal thumbnails on videos and live streams because everyone does. Every single image that's a thumbnail out there is now AI generated. And so it's not distinctive, it's not standing out, and it makes me wonder. This is certainly the scuttlebutt on Substack, which is a bunch of writers hoping to one another. See, the organic stuff we do, people really want that, right? I'm hoping that you're right about that. I want to, before we get on to our next topic, I'm going to hit you with this question from the Cynthia Rice, but I got to warn everybody that Kara Swisher thinks highly of our guest here. And so I don't want to put you in a bad position here, but this is an audience question, and I believe in pushing audience questions. So here you go. Does Katie think Kara Swisher provides honest reporting on the tech bros?
I think she provides a very valuable perspective that should be listened to, but I don't think that she should be the only one that is listened to as part of tech reporting. There's a lot of really great other folks out there. Alex Heath, I really like. Alice Kutakeritz with Big Technology. There's so many independent folks that have been doing Substacks or newsletters or podcasts and all that kind of stuff around this. And the truth of the matter is it's usually somewhere in the middle, right? And Kara's a little bit of a mix of journalist and opinion. And she has been right. And I've been in that spot where she has warned me about something way back in the day. And I was like, no, it's going to be fine. And then she ended up being right. And I was like, oh, that's really annoying that she ends up being right on those things. And I do find her perspective to be valuable.
You know who else people should listen to who I can recommend highly? Look at the bottom banner, Katie Harbath, good voice on all of these topics. I want to just hit very quickly on this issue of tech company spending in elections. I don't know. This is a little bit of a dog bites man story. It's, oh, big companies are spending in our elections. I remember when that was big news 16 years ago. But the pattern that I'm observing, and there's a certain amount of witless empiricism to this, I don't have hard and fast numbers on it, is that there have been some toe in the water attempts to play big in federal elections. I'm starting to see that ramp up. I'm seeing more, although it's a little bit more under the radar, of tech companies, and specifically the companies that are behind the big AI platforms, playing at the state level. And at the state level, elections are far more vulnerable to the influence of a lot of spending. I've worked in a state legislature, I've worked in Congress, I've managed campaigns, and I can say that these state legislative races are, like, you're talking about tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's the kind of thing where a little bit of money from an AI company can absolutely overwhelm a race. What are you seeing? How big is the megaphone of these companies in elections right now? And do you see it growing?
So I think one change, you're right. Tech companies have been spending money in elections for quite some time. All companies have, but it's been a lot quieter. It's usually we're going to give to both the D and the R, whoever might be our key committee folks, stuff like that. Elon changed that with the money that he put in. with Trump, with super PACs, all of that. And then the companies they saw how that then paid off for Elon. It was high risk, high reward on that one, because if Harris had won, Elon would have been in a totally different spot. So now you have the tech companies and tech leaders creating super PACs where they are putting a lot more money on the advertising side. It's not just we're going to do a small donation to this candidate, right? It's like a lot more money for advertising and all of that. I think they want to make an example out of some folks of being like, if you go against us, we might come after you in your primary. We might come after you in a general elections. But this is, I think, a testing ground for the presidential for a lot of these folks to see, is this an area they want to keep putting money in or not? And so I think it's still too early to know, because we need to see how the general election plays out. To your point about the state legislative elections, that is going to be a big place that I'm going to be watching. The other thing that I think is interesting, and OpenAI in particular is doing this. They made a very, very public way of being like, we're not associated with the super PAC Greg Brockman has been donating to, right? Trying to be like, we as a company aren't there. But you do see Chris Lehane putting out policy positions for candidates. You do see them putting out a lot more roadmaps for policymakers and stuff of where they want to see this conversation going, and trying to seed it and be a part of shaping that. And I just think that I just don't see enough acknowledgement of that, because when all of this is early on, these state legislators in particular, they don't have a lot of time to dig into all this stuff and know what's happening. And so they're getting bombarded by all these different angles. And so I think that's one we need to be paying attention to as well, because it's not just lobbying behind the scenes, it's lobbying right out in front. But I don't see a lot of necessarily counter weight to that.
I will make two very quick points before we move on. One is, the moment you said the word Elon a moment ago, we spiked in viewers on Twitter. I'm not making this up. Now, is that what we might call in statistics spurious correlation? Possibly. But just as an experiment, I'm going to say the word Elon in the nicest possible way several times right now. I'm going to refer to Elon just to see what happens. The other point really is, in all seriousness, that, again, I'm a veteran of being a legislative staffer in a state legislature and in Congress. And this is no shade at the state legislators, but they have so many fewer resources to try to work through issues. They deal with every single issue that members of Congress deal with. They deal with all of the lobbying, maybe not quite as many dollars behind it, but all of the business interests, all of the advocacy interests. They have to wade through just as much information, and they have far fewer staff resources and help to do it. Frequently, at least in New Hampshire, these are people who have full-time jobs. So The point is, it is not only easier to overwhelm state legislators with money in their campaigns, it's very easy to overwhelm them with expertise and information that frequently the companies have and the legislators do not. And it's awfully hard for public interest advocacy organizations to push back with the same vigor and the same level of attention. And on that note, I do want to zoom up to Congress, because that connects directly to a really fascinating point made by our recent guest, Glenn Kessler, former fact checker for the Washington Post, who wrote on his Substack the following paragraph just yesterday. Speaking of Newt Gingrich and the 1994 Republican Revolution in Congress, Gingrich also eliminated a little-known congressional agency, the Office of Technological Assessment. The putative reason was to reduce costs, but OTA was staffed with brilliant scientists and other experts who objectively advised Congress on complex technical issues. After all, most members of Congress have little scientific expertise. As a reporter, I used to speak to OTA staff all the time, as they could clearly explain complex scientific issues, but Gingrich apparently thought science, as expressed by OTA, had an anti-GOP bias, so OTA was shut down, and it's nearly 150 staff laid off, just as the technological revolution would begin to change American society. Congress has been hampered ever since, as the lack of in-house expertise allowed lobbyists to gain the upper hand when crafting legislation. I can say that while we have the Congressional Research Service, which is excellent, and they have tremendous expertise there, that's a little-known branch of our legislative branch, it's necessary but not sufficient for what staffers are dealing with, what members of Congress are dealing with immensely complex technical issues. Do you see a connection there between what Glenn is saying and the fact that we have really struggled at the federal level to even come up with a framework or an approach to how to begin to think about how to deal with AI, how to regulate it, how to debate it, how to assess it?
I do, from two different angles. One is to what you were saying about not having I'm going to use unbiased, meaning not having a tech company or someone behind them expertise to be able to help these members of Congress and their staff think through these types of problems. But I think that the thread also in there was the politicization of it. So when Republicans came into office in 94, they had been out of power for what, decades? It was quite
40 years.
a long time.
Yeah.
A very long time. And this is right before, because I came to DC in 03. And so you continue to see this politicization of this type of work in the government, usually when there's a changing hands of administration, whether in the executive or in Congress. That has also really been a challenge to people trying to do this work. And again, trying to weigh these really difficult trade-offs that now you have to add this politics layer on top of, which keeps me in business on helping people think through that. But it is a real challenge and everybody's biased in some way. We all have some biases. There's no way of having anything that's unbiased, but it makes it really difficult to have those conversations about what these answers should be. Because I'll tell you, I spent a lot of my time between the 2016 election and when I left in March of 21, I'd walk into one room with groups on the left who all told me they wanted me to do something one way. And in fact, they oftentimes disagreed. And then the right would tell me to do it a different way. And I could never get the two rooms together to try to think through all of that. And so I think that's going to be a continued
There's differences
challenge.
in what the companies want these days, what the AI companies are advocating for.
Exactly. And so that's why I came up with that phrase, the kaleidoscopic minefield. And I saw somebody make fun of my catchphrases, which is totally fine on it. But I try to think through, because it's like, I need a visual for me of like, how do I describe all of these different facets that we are all having to think through? And one little thing changes and it turns it, and it completely changed the playing field that we're working with right now. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, not just over the next few months to the midterms for campaigns, but the presidential ones, because where AI is in January 2027 is going to be very different than where AI is in November 2028. And so how will campaigns and our government and our regulators and everybody try to thread that needle? It's going to be one of the most challenging, I think, cycles that we will ever go through.
I don't want to leave people in suspense. The truth is that I did see a spike of 15 additional viewers right after I said the name Elon 3 times a few minutes ago. Coincidence? I don't know. I do want to kind of leave people on this question to you. I set this up with the kind of provocative idea that this is the first AI election, by which I meant that AI is, at least to some degree, embedded in every link in that chain between what campaigns say and the decisions that voters make and the decisions that government makes. And I think that there's a case for that. You've built a lot of that case. What do you make of that proposition that this is the first AI election? And what do you make of the even more provocative idea that this may be the last election, for at least for a long time, where AI is not the driving issue?
So I do think this is going to be and I assume by this election, you mean the 2026 midterms. I do think that it is going to be, we saw AI used a little bit in 2024. I think this is the one where we're actually going to really see some more impact on voters. I think we'll see a lot more in 28. It'll just keep evolving. In terms of AI being the dominant issue, the reason I think you're right is because AI will infiltrate every single industry that we have out there. It's affecting jobs, it's affecting our economy, it's affecting all of these different aspects that people generally vote on, right? They generally vote on the things that are impacting them, their kids' schools, how their kids are learning, what all that looks like. So in that part, I think it's correct. But I also think that it would be wrong for campaigns to only think about it through the AI lens and not for they're worried about rising cost of groceries, inflation, all of those different things too. And so I think it's important to find some balance in all of that. But this is definitely going to be a dominant issue for at least, I think, through the 2030s.
I Completely agree, obviously, because I threw it out there. But look, I think there's a lot to navigate with this. I'm sorry that because of Gremlins, we didn't give as much shrift to the third link in the chain, the influence of AI money in elections. But I think you're going to see continued advance in all of these. I told you via email that I'm in text communication with friends who are still in the campaign game, who are managing, consulting. And it seems like the AI influence in campaigns is very real and is only picking up steam. I know it's very real on the congressional side, on the staffing side. If people want to keep track of what's going on here and how technological brains are increasingly affecting our human brains, they can follow you. They can subscribe to you at your Substack, anchorchange.substack.com, which is scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and your upcoming book, Disrupting Politics, a front row seat at the collision of technology and democracy. When is it due out?
Fall 2026. I should have an official date here any day now, but trying to time it with the new Aaron Sorkin movie, The Social Reckoning, coming out on October 9th, because my book looks at how tech's impacted politics from 2000 to the tech CEOs at the inauguration in 2025 through my story of going through that.
Oh, technology platforms and politics. They go together like nuts and gum. All right, Katie Harbath, thanks so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. We've just scratched the surface. So I know people will want to follow you to get a heck of a lot more of what you're writing about. And next week, we have another outstanding guest. I don't want to give away too much. They write for The Atlantic. Okay, I'll leave it there. We have another outstanding guest coming next week. It's going to be fantastic. In the meantime, hey, people, look, things have been hard out there. People wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell. I have nothing to say on that topic because I have no new information. We didn't even talk about the Graham Plattner debacle. We can get more into that next week. I'm sure I'll have stuff to say about it on my Substack. And we didn't talk, of course, about the disaster of the USMNT last night, which I'm not ready to talk about yet. So look, hang in there. Bear with me. Be good to each other. Stay safe. Be well. I'll see you all next week. Take care.